Human Immunity by Emma Parsons. Here are some examples of pathogens that the immune system might encounter. Viruses, they're covered in protective proteins and invade the host cells so they can replicate themselves, spreading the virus more widely. Bacteria are single-celled organisms which come in a variety of forms. They can cause bacterial infections, enabling harmless bacteria to become pathogenic. Fungi causes fungal infections such as ringworm, athlete's foot and thrush. Parasites, which are microorganisms such as worms and protozoa. Insects, such as mosquitoes, which feed from the skin, they suck the blood and cause infections such as malaria. Non-specific immunity is the first line of defence, so we're looking at the barriers on a physical level. The mucosal lining of the respiratory tract, the skin, the sweat, tears, saliva, mucus, stomach acid, the mouth's lining, eyelids and earwax. These all prevent the pathogens entering the body. Inflammation occurs at the site of an injury. It's an infection by microorganisms which have entered the skin. The swelling occurs due to an increased blood supply to the area. This is to help to heal it. Also, substances are released to assist with the healing process. The blood vessel walls become more porous, allowing more blood to come into the area. It often feels very hot and swollen. The capillaries clot stop the spread of the microorganisms as well. So your white blood cells would be coming into this area and killing off all these pathogens that have entered your system. A fever occurs perhaps after an injury or an infection. It causes a raised temperature. The hypothalamus gland increases the temperature of the body in order to get rid of the pathogen in your system. So the blood is brought deeper into the body to keep it warmer. The body can shiver, and you may have symptoms such as headaches, chills, sweating, muscle aches, loss of appetite, dehydration, irritability and weakness. Acquired immunity can either be active or passive, natural or artificial. So the antibodies can develop through an infection, through a vaccination, or through antibodies received through mother's breast milk perhaps, or through antibodies received through a gamma globin injection or infusion. This is what assists the immunological memory. So your memory of T and B cells will remember exactly what they've encountered before, therefore you shouldn't get the disease again or after your vaccination. Once the cells have encountered a pathogen, they will remember that one only. They will not remember a different version of that pathogen. The memory cells then wait inside the lymph nodes for the next time that it encounters the antibodies in the system. Sometimes you may have a reaction for the next time you do encounter the pathogen, but it's definitely not as bad if you've had the disease recognised by the memory cells. In the case of a mutated disease, such as maybe flu or cold, the vaccinations need to be changed yearly as these mutate quite rapidly. Sensitivity to antigens are basically allergic reactions to various types of things. It's the innate and adaptive immune response become hypersensitive to some of these allergens. It can be passed down through your family, so your mum or dad may be allergic to a certain pollen or something and you may end up with that as well. It can be brought on by dust, food or other substances, perhaps pollen from the trees or particular flowers. The body releases immunoglobulins, so it's fighting off this foreign body that it thinks is a pathogen in your system. This can produce a range of symptoms from runny noses, your eyes may swell up, you may sneeze, you may be very itchy nose, itchy eyes. In severe cases, you may get an anaphylactic shock, which is closing up of the airways. This can prove to be fatal if it's not treated in time. B cells are part of the immune system's defence mechanism, so they detect antigens. They're generated within the bone marrow and make up 20% of the body's lymphocytes. They have surface receptors which detect whether there's foreign bodies around. They remove antigens, they mature in the bone marrow, they send immunoglobulins to the infection site. Millions of these are produced by the body daily, and they are generated also in the bone marrow. B cells can be transitional, naive, plasma or memory cells. Transitional cells are the maturing cells. Naive cells are the ones that haven't yet met an antigen. They can differentiate into plasma or B memory cells and occur in secondary lymphoid organs. They have divided into two subcategories of B cells and regulate the response of the T cells. The plasma cells, or effector cells, have differentiated from the naive B cells, and they are the ones that secrete the large amounts of antibodies. There are four types of T cells: the T regulatory cells, the T helper cells, the memory T cells and the cytotoxic cells. They all have a different role to play. The regulatory cells, they regulate and suppress the immune response, so once the immune response is not needed anymore, it's responsible for turning that off. The cytotoxic cell is the one that eliminates and gets rid of all the infected or malignant cells. The cytotoxic cells, they're the ones that kill off the cells that are infected with the virus. And the memory cells, the ones that remember the virus for next time it's encountered. Self-tolerance is the immune system's acceptance and recognition of self-produced antigens and non-threatening, whilst at the same time responding to foreign bodies. This fine balance is vital for normal function of the body as well as our overall health. The body has to have a balance so that it does not attack its own cells, tissues and organs. If it is lost, it could cause an autoimmune disease or an allergy to a food. Tolerance is maintained when the adaptive immune cells mature and go through a series of checkpoints to eliminate autoreactive cells. If a B cell recognises host cells or a T cell recognises a self-antigen, this cell is illuminated. However, there are many autoreactive immune cells in the human body. These cells have no ability to react or damage a host cell. Transplanted organ rejection. This is when the donor organs are rejected from the body. The donor tissue and the receiver tissue is tested to see if it's a match. It's never 100%, but they go for the closest match to limit chances of rejection. The surgeons or doctors would give immunosuppressive drugs to stop that organ being rejected. The immune system automatically thinks that it's a foreign body that's entered the system, so it tries to attack and get rid of it. That's why they need the drugs to keep it in place. Unfortunately, these drugs can make people more prone to other infections because it takes down your immune system's defences. Autoimmune disease is the inability of the body to differentiate between harmful and healthy tissues, so it attacks the healthy cells. It can affect any part of the body, the joints, the nerves, the red blood cells, the skin. Hashimoto disease is one of the autoimmune disorders. It can be caused by an underactive or overactive thyroid. The immune system attacks the thyroid, causing it to be dysfunctional. It's common in middle-aged ladies and can be related to type 1 diabetes or poor adrenal function. Another example of an autoimmune disease is lupus. It's an inflammatory disease. It attacks organs and tissues and causes swelling, damaged joints, skin lesions, rash, breathlessness, headaches, chest pain, memory loss, dry eyes, confusion and lack of circulation. The innate immune system activates once a pathogen has passed the physical barriers. This defence consists of many different types of cells which I've listed on the slide. These cells are called phagocytes. They recognise any foreign invaders that enter the system and destroy them using a process called phagocytosis. During this process, the macrophage binds to the pathogen and engulfs it, breaking it down with the assistance of the lysosomes. The macrophage then produces a protein called cytokines. The cytokines recruit other white blood cells. These help with the process. They call them neutrophils, eosinophils and basophils. They're on hand just in case that the pathogen cannot be engulfed. Adaptive immunity is the third line of defence. It consists of dendritic cells, lymph nodes, lymphocytes, antibodies, which are T and B cells. Dendritic cells are the cells which communicate between the innate and adaptive immune systems. When the macrophages sound the alarm and send signals to the other cells, the dendritic cells respond. At an infection site, phagocytes break away parts of the pathogen, then carry these to the lymph nodes where the adaptive immunity begins. This is where the memory cells are lying in wait. The dendritic cells then lead and activate the T cells, leading them to the pathogen. Cell-mediated response. T cells have receptors on the surface. T cells with a complementary shaped receptor are stimulated when meeting the antigen. Once they have met the antigen, they grow and multiply. This is what is known as a clone of cells. The clone cells then differentiate into the 4 different types of T cells. The ones I explained earlier, the killer T cells, helper T cells, suppressor T cells and memory T cells. All cells except the memory cells travel to the site of infection. Humoral response. B cells make clones of antigens. These are made up of plasma and memory cells. Plasma cells that make thousands of antibody cells every second. The B cells never leave the lymph nodes. It is the antibody that's produced that travels around the body to find the infection site. If a B cell has met with an antigen before, it will recognise it and is able to bind with it to disable the spread of the virus. When the antigen, the immunoglobulins, combine with the pathogen, it labels the pathogen as a foreign body. This happens with several cells at a time, forming a complex mass of cells. This makes the pathogen more vulnerable to phagocytes. The antibody labels the bacteria when it sticks to it, so it recognises the antigens that are toxic to the system. The pathogens are then neutralised so that they do not enter another host cell. Fetal-maternal tolerance. This is what prevents the woman's body from developing an immune response to the fetus. Major histocompatibility complex proteins help the immune system decipher what's a host or a foreign cell. The MHC is also known as the human leukocyte antigen. Not a lot is known about how the body tolerates the fetus, but it's thought that the placenta helps reduce the exposure to the immune cells of the mother, and the placenta perhaps is coated in proteins to limit the immune recognition, whilst regulatory and suppressive cells may also assist with this. Vaccinations and immunological memory. So vaccinations reduce the risk of disease by using natural defences to build up the immunity. So when they're giving you the dose of the vaccine, it helps your body to recognise the foreign bodies. It produces the antibodies required to fight this disease, and hopefully you will never experience the symptoms once you've had the vaccine. So memory cells recall the pathogen and can fight it off more easily. So if you are exposed, you're less likely to become poorly. The measles vaccination was introduced in the UK in 1968. The disease was easier to catch than the flu or the common cold, and to this day measles remains the major cause of mortality in children around the world. In 1941 there were 409,521 cases reported to Public Health England, as well as 857 deaths from the disease. The rates were higher still at 409,715 reported cases and 1,145 deaths reported to Public Health England in 1941. Following the vaccination programme from 1968 to 69, these rates fell significantly to 142,111 cases and only 36 deaths, and these rates have fallen ever since the vaccine was introduced. These rates have fluctuated over the years but have remained low because there have been various vaccination campaigns every other year when it's been necessary. There are many benefits of vaccination. It can be used when a disease cannot be cured using other drugs. Successful vaccination programmes have been polio and smallpox. In 1979, smallpox was eradicated completely in the UK. In 2002, Europe was declared free of polio. Vaccine prevents disease in most cases or lessens the symptoms. Childhood deaths have decreased dramatically since the introduction of vaccines. Protects the vulnerable, so the elderly as well as the young and people with other underlying health conditions are protected. And recent figures show that 94.8% of the population are now immunised from measles. Herd immunity only works if there's 80 to 90% of the population immunised. Only then 4 out of 5 people will not get sick. Disease will not spread further. Areas with low vaccination rates may see higher infection rates. If no vaccine available, adults can build immunity, but children and vulnerable adults are more at risk. Viruses can mutate and new vaccines are being produced. Vaccination programmes are available from the age of 8-year-old and upwards. There are many different viruses that this can protect people from, as well as other illnesses. This is an example of a schedule that you would see from the baby being 2 months old, 8 weeks old, upwards, and it tells you which vaccinations you need at which time for the benefits to be seen. Factors affecting vaccine uptake. The risk of disease is a motivation for having a vaccine. Side effects can put people off having the vaccine. Coincidental incidents being blamed on the vaccine put people off having it. Thinking they aren't needed as everybody else will have one. Low infection rate in the area. Quickly produced vaccines might scare people away. Inaccurate information being given about the vaccine. Lack of trust in the companies that produce it perhaps. Bad experiences in the past. Ethnic backgrounds. Some ethnic backgrounds might not agree with a vaccine. Pharmaceutical companies mistrust. Lack of information regarding a vaccine. Religious beliefs. Access to services may not always be accessible. Herd mentality. Community belief. Safety incidents. Developmental processes. Content of the vaccine and prefer natural immunity. There may be barriers and practical considerations such as childcare commitments, forgetting appointments, getting time off work, timing and availability of appointments, transport and costs of getting to the appointments, change of addresses when not up to date with a GP when they're asked or called in to get the vaccinations, and lack of access to information.